This week what you're going to be learning about is interpreting circle graphs. So some things to know before you get started is that data is collected by an experiment, a survey, polls, interview, observations, tally sheets, and questionnaires. So basically they're asking questions and they're gathering that data really in any of those forms. Circle graphs are used to display data that is part of a whole or any percentage of data. It's important that we remember that all circle graphs add up to equal 100%. There's no way to have more than 100% on a circle graph, and we don't want to have less than 100%. We want all of it included in the graph. So many times there's going to be a data point missing. So if you see on the circle graph that we have here, the graph is about most purchased food. So maybe that was a grocery store was seeing what they were purchasing a lot of, or a restaurant is figuring out what they sell the most, and they're just trying to figure out what is purchased the most often. So looking at it, I see in the, up here, I see that it has peaches are 22%, turkey is 13%, pizza is 15%, chicken is 10%, steak, we don't know, and pasta is 12%. So just by looking at it, I can see that chicken is the least amount, the least purchased food that we have here. And even without knowing what percentage this is, it looks like steak is the largest. So steak looks larger than peaches, so I'm going to think that this is the largest. Now, how can I know for sure that that one's the largest and what percentage steak is purchased? So like we talked about on the last slide, all of the parts of your circle graph need to add up to equal 100%. So in order for us to figure that out, what we need to do is we need to add up 12, 22, 13, 15, and 10. So if we were to add all these up, we would do 12 plus 22 plus 13 plus 15 plus 10. That gives us 72. So these 5 sections all added together equals 72%. Okay? So if all of it together is 100%, how would we figure out what just the steak is? Well, if we wanted to just figure out this section, we would take it away from the total circle that we have. So 100%, and we take away the 72 that we already know, and we would be left with 28%. Okay? So looking at it, some questions that you could be asked for this is what was the most purchased item. So again, that's going to be your largest percentage for this particular graph because we are looking at most purchased food. So 28% is our largest ticket item that's being sold at this place. What is the least purchased item? That's the opposite. We're looking for the smallest, which we talked about was 10%. And which two items together total 25%. So in order to figure that out, we would have to add 2 of those percentages together. So we can, this is like a guess and check sort of situation, or you can just look at them and figure out which ones would add up to equal 25. So for example, peaches and pasta. If we were to add that 22% and 12%, would we get that 25%? No. There's actually a couple different options that you can have. You can have turkey and pasta, 13 plus 12 is 25. Or pizza and chicken together, 15 plus 10 is 25. So you had 2 options that you could have for which 2 items together total 25%. Okay, so what the problem that you're going to be most often solving for circle graphs is it's going to give you the circle graph. It's going to tell you how many people there were, and it's going to ask you how many specifically was this section. So for example, if 200 people were surveyed, then how many said most of the time they purchased pizza? Okay, so you don't want to know 15%. We're not asking for the percentage. We're asking how many people out of that original 200 total. So out of 200 people, 15% chose pizza. That is not equivalent to 15 people. The only time that that would equal 15 people is if this was 100. So you could mathematically figure it out without having to do what I'm about to show you because it's 200. Some of you might be able to see what you would do to that 15. But what you're going to have to do in order to figure that out is we're going to have to use our part over whole equals percent over 100 proportion and cross multiply to solve. So step 1, we need to figure out what is our whole. What is the total amount of people that were surveyed? It tells us in the question 200 people were surveyed. So in that place I would put 200. 200 is our whole. Then what percentage are we looking at? If we want to know purchase pizza, we go to pizza at the graph and we see it's 15. So we have 15% over 100 equals part over 200. Do we know what that part is? No, we don't know what that part is, so we leave it as x. Then we cross multiply. We multiply x times 100 and 15% times 200. So we're going to do it as 15, not as 1500, 0.15. We're trying to multiply it as the 15. So when we multiply 15 times 200, we get 3,000, and x times 100 is 100x. At this point, we're solving for x, so in order to get x by itself, we're trying to isolate the variable. We do the inverse operation of what's happening here. This is 100 times x, so the opposite of multiplication is division. We would be dividing by 100 to both sides. When we divide by 100 to both sides, the 100 cancels out here, and we're left with just x. 3,000 divided by 100. When we're dividing that, we could cancel out those two zeros, can't we? And we're left with 30 equals x. So 30 people chose pizza at this restaurant or store, whatever we're looking at. 30 people chose pizza out of the 200. So if you think about it, 15 out of 100 chose pizza. If we were doing 200, you would just multiply that by 2. That's what I was kind of hinting at the beginning. Alright, so on the next problem, it could get a little more complicated. Like this problem, it's the same graph that we've been dealing with the whole time. It says if 200 people were surveyed, then how many more said steak was purchased than those who purchased turkey? So you're looking at two different things. You want to know, well, one, how many people chose steak, and two, how many people chose turkey. So you're going to have to do the same process that we just did with that part over whole equals percent over 100. You're going to have to do one for steak and then another one for turkey. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to solve for turkey and I want you to solve for steak. That's going to tell you how many people chose turkey, how many people chose steak. Then, that's not what the question is asking. It's not asking for how many people chose those. It's asking for how many more. So what that is telling us to do is to find the difference between them. We're trying to figure out how many more. We're going to subtract the number of people for steak, the number of people for turkey. Now, I want you to pause the video, and I want you to try that. And then when you're done, play the video, and we'll see if you were right. So what you should have done is you should have separated it into steak and turkey. Okay, so on steak, we have our part over whole equals percent over 100. 100 is always going to be in that bottom right corner. For steak, I go to the circle graph. I see 28%, so I put that above 100. My total, or my whole, you could say total as well, is 200 people, so I'm going to put 200 here. Now these, the denominators on both of these sets of fractions to make the proportion are going to be the same. Why are they the same? Because they have the same whole. We're talking about the same amount of people, and the percentage is always out of 100. Notice our x is also in the same place. We don't know the part that is steak and the part that is turkey. The only difference between these two proportions is the percentage. So steak was 28%, we found that from the graph. Turkey was 13%, we also found that from the graph. All that's left to do was to cross multiply these two. X times 100 is 100x. 28 times 200 is 5,600. And 13 times 200 is 2,600. Divide by 100 to both sides on both proportions. We're left with steak was 56 people. Turkey was 26 people. Again, that's not the answer to the question. We want to know how many more purchased steak than purchased turkey. So what we had to do is we had to subtract steak and subtract turkey. 56 minus 26 is 30. There it is again. Alright, if you are working on your problems and you're still confused, feel free to reach out to any of your teachers. Here is their information listed below. Make sure you're checking the website for more videos. I'll post a couple of videos of how to do specific problems from the packet. And if you have any questions, let us know.